This is the worst selection British Cycling have ever made since they decided to drop me. Hello everybody and welcome to today's episode of the Chris Pritchard Cycling News Show. Less of a news show today, more, I'll say how it is, it's just a rant. It's just a pure out and out rant. So sit down, grab your popcorn, have a brew and enjoy the show. If you've not done already, please make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I want 35,000 of you by the end of 2020. We're less than 2,000 away from that now. I have faith that you're going to want to do it. Don't forget, Christmas is coming up as well. If you remember back to last year.
Hello everybody and welcome to Santa's Cycling News with me, Santa. Oosh! That's what he does, isn't it? Oosh! Yeah.
Got a feeling Santa's going to be emptying his sack on this channel again. All over me. Right, without further ado, let's get into this rant. News. Alright, so this news story broke as I'd edited and finished posting last week's last video. Yeah, alright, I posted the wrong video. Get over it, alright? However, I didn't have time to put in this news story, but over on British Cycling, they released their list of their first ever 2020 UCI Cycling esports team. And over on the British Cycling website, it said British Cycling has announced the 9 elite men and women who will compete at the UCI Cycling Esports World Championships next month, Wednesday, 9th of December. The first of its kind World Championships will take place entirely virtually on the global online training and racing platform for athletes and comes after British Cycling's first ever National Esports Cycling Championships, hosted live in London back in March 2019. Competing using the first over-the-line scratch race format, men and women will compete over the same route and 50-kilometre distance of the same course, the Watopia figure of with hilly KOM finish. Ooh, exciting. The two new world champions will be awarded a physical rainbow jersey each to be worn for sanctioned cycling esports events in 2021. Sanctioned, as if they're not just going to wear it all the time. Anyway, Zwift will also create a digital version of the jersey to be worn in-game. Talking about the Great Britain cycling team, Stephen Park, performance director, said, "I'm really looking forward to the inaugural UCI Esports World Championships and I'd like to commend the UCI and Zwift on this exciting collaboration. Amongst the talented Great Britain cycling team lineup, we have reigning Olympic and Paralympic champions, including Helena Barker, Ed Clancy and Dame Sarah Story, all vying to add another rainbow jersey to their collection. Senior Academy riders Megan Barker and Jenny Holt will be keen to show what they're capable of in this first year of their Paris 2024 cycle, and I'm looking forward to seeing Andy Tennant compete once more in Great Britain colours. It's good also to be able to extend the opportunity to riders who have excelled on the online platforms this year, with Danny Christmas, Max Stedman and Rob Scott all making the selection." Alright, Max Stedman, we'll speak about him later, and I think that is a great selection for the team. However, I'm just going to pull him up on the fact that he's mentioning that these riders, Danny Christmas and Rob Scott, have excelled on online platforms. When I looked at their Zwift profile, I could only find they both raced twice on Zwift. That's not really excelling on Zwift, is it? But we'll get into all that shortly. As you would expect, the Zwift community is a strong community. On one hand, you've got those people who understand Zwift, who get Zwift, and who accept it for what it is and use the platform for not only racing but training. And then on the other hand, you've got those traditional cyclists who like to risk their lives by heading out in the winter, come rain or shine, snow or sleet, fog or wind. They don't care. They're out there and they'll make their opinions known about Zwift, and they think that racing on Zwift is pointless and it's full of cheats and blah, blah, blah. And as you'd expect, when this was posted over on Facebook, some of the comments were golden. Let's take a look at a few of them. I mean, this is up there as one of my favourites. Ollie Peckover. Ha, what a joke of a federation. Yeah, good point. Not once have I ever seen one of them in a Zwift race, apart from Max. Yet somehow these are the ones selected to go for a world title. Looks like Clancy needs to start getting some miles in. Again, we'll talk about the people's... A little bit of guerrilla marketing here from James Vickers. USA Cycling used RGT Cycling, allowing riders to race to qualify. Again, we'll talk about that shortly. Sally Ann potentially getting the wrong end of the stick here. Is this a joke? Why isn't our greatest Olympian cyclist Laura Kenny included in this lineup? Well, I'll tell you, for one, she'd get dropped straight away. Not because she doesn't have the talent, just because she's not got the experience she needs to do what she needs to on Zwift. Philip Taylor, great to see Max Stedman selected. Amen to that. And here from Gino Bartoli, my favourite comment, BC selection criteria. Hands up, who has ever heard of Zwift? Now, I really don't get this. And before we go any further, I will say that these athletes have achieved more than I will ever dream to achieve, right? I am not taking away from their talents. I'm not taking away from their specialised pursuits in cycling. But when it comes to Zwift racing, just like a track rider on the road, just like a sprint rider in an endurance race, just like a BMX rider and one of those riders that stands on the handlebars and does like the gymnastics and stuff, right? They're completely different sports. They require completely different skill sets, right? And this is the same when it comes to indoor cycling and virtual platforms and racing on those platforms. They're a completely different kettle of fish. Now, again, some of these riders can push out numbers that I could only ever dream of, but I could potentially do as well, if not slightly better than them, in a Zwift race because I know the platform. I know the intricacies of racing on an indoor platform. How hard could it have been to have worked that out? Now, don't forget, British Cycling put on the first ever televised British National Championships. Remember back in March 2019 that Cameron Jeffers won? Remember that? Of course you do. British Cycling were ahead of the curve when it came to everyone else. They decided to put on a qualifying event, then they decided to put on a nationally televised event. And it was a great success. It seemed like they'd got it. They understood that this platform was here to stay and it could be potentially a new genre of racing entirely. You know, Eric Mint said he wants Zwift to be part of the Olympics in years to come. And honestly, there is a good chance it will be. Now, we'll not get into the legitimacy of racing and calibration and all that jazz, but as it is as a platform, there is potential that you could have a physical esport in the Olympics. And it looked like British Cycling were ahead of the curve. They produced this qualifying event on Zwift that everyone could do from home, and then the top 10 of that went to the finals, which was a live final, televised in a studio. It was an amazing event for both the men and the women. But do you know how many of those 20 riders made the cut for the first ever British Cycling esports team? Yeah, that's right. None of them. None of them did. Not the current national champion Rosamund Bradbury over in the women's, not James Phillips, the current kind of national. Now, one of the criteria for selection, it appears, this is coming from Ed Lavrak's video that he posted. If you want to check that out, you can do so up there, is that riders need to either be part of a UCI team or they need to be in the UCAD testing pool, basically the anti-doping agency here in the UK. You need to be part of their testing pool. So obviously, you know, the last thing British Cycling want, and this is fully understandable, is to offer places to community riders to then all of them come back with positive tests because they've been cheating out their bums because no one else is testing them. I understand that, but we've known about these championships for long enough for someone at British Cycling to check out Zwift Power, just to go online and check out to see what everyone's doing, and within 10 or 15 minutes work out who are the best Zwift riders in the UK. From there, it's a matter of just saying, potentially you might be up for selection for the British team. If you'd like to be, let us know. And if you are, then over the next month or 2 months, we just need to do 2 drugs tests, 1 drug test, just to make sure you're clean. Because the last thing we want is a scandal of you being doped off your face when we've just given you a place on the national team. So I understand that, but it wouldn't have been that hard to get these community riders into the system on UCAD to then give them a piss test or 2 to see if they're all clean. Now, if you work for UCAD or British Cycling and the protocol isn't as simple as that, then feel free to leave your comments down below. But I'm sure they had enough time to work out who was the good Zwifters in the UK, get them tested, and if they wanted to be part of it, give them that opportunity to be selected. But there was really no opportunity for anyone other than British Cycling riders to be selected, and I kind of feared that this was going to be the case. Now let's take a look at the riders who have been selected for this championship. So if we look at the men's side, the only one out of those 4 that I would potentially select myself is Max Stedman. He spent a lot of time on Zwift, and I counted over like 20 or 30 races that he's actually entered, potentially more, but that's all I could find as I scroll through his profile on the companion app. So Max Stedman knows Zwift, he knows Zwift racing, and he's built perfectly for it. As a selector, you would think that you would look at the power numbers, and also if you knew the algorithm within Zwift, you know that lightweight riders who can produce good power have a massive advantage on Zwift, and someone like Max is the perfect candidate to actually get a decent result. And we could be looking at Max Stedman as esports world champion at the end of this race. I'd definitely put him up there as a favourite in the top 10. But Ed Clancy, I bloody love Ed Clancy. He's a friend of mine, but hopefully you won't mind me saying that his Zwifting experience is, well, it's fact, it's next to nothing. He has not entered a race on Zwift. Now, listen, Ed Clancy. If anyone can just produce numbers just for the sake of it, it's Ed Clancy. But will Ed really understand the intricacies of a start on Zwift? Will he understand the intricacies of the draft and potentially the power-ups on Zwift? Unless he's going to have a crash course in the next couple of weeks, not a chance. Same goes for Andy Tennant. Andy Tennant raced the first qualifying race for that British National Championships and almost made it to the final. Again, Andy Tennant, pursuit rider, amazing at producing numbers off the bat. But again, you look at those intricacies, you look at what you need to do on Zwift and how you need to know the platform and know the courses to get the best out of it to potentially race for that victory. And same with Rob Scott. You know, you look at, as I said earlier, Stephen Park was saying that the riders have got their selection based on the way that they've excelled on these online platforms. Rob Scott's raced on Zwift twice. I just don't get it. You've got the likes of Rosamund Bradbury, who won the national championships, Leah Dixon, who's out there representing on the world scene, Mary Wilkinson. You've got these riders that a lot of people potentially have never heard of, who could wipe the floor with the rest of these women. And over in the men's, you don't have to look past Ed Laverack, friend of the show, love him to bits. You got Cameron Jeffers. I mean, that selection might be a little bit iffy, but again, Cam, super strong, capable of beating, right, the likes of John Mould, the likes of George Pym, the likes of Tom Moses, James Phillips, the rider who took that national championship off Cameron, Steve Young, Kim Little. All right, Kim might be a little bit old now, but still, I'm joking, Kim. But still, again, a rider who knows the platform inside out, has been riding it for years and can use his experience to get a good result, even if they're not as strong as some of the riders that potentially might be in that race. The top and bottom of it is, right, it's so narrow-minded, and it's, well, that's nothing new from British cycling. But a young, spunky, forward-thinking individual could have literally put a couple of hours effort into this and given British cycling the chance to have the first ever esports world champion, as well as introducing the cycling world to new riders who we potentially might not have ever heard of if it wasn't for Zwift, and given them the platform and the opportunity to do something amazing. But as ever with them, they've got their own clique and they're sticking with their clique, and it doesn't really do anybody any good, really, because I can guarantee at least half of those riders are going to get dropped within the first 5K. And you look at how USA Cycling have done it, they've given the opportunity to put trials on over on RGT. Now, for me personally, I can't see the point in using a different platform to then go and race on another platform. Gavin Dempster, just going back to those riders, Gavin Dempster didn't even get a shout in. And again, another one of those riders from the community who's super strong, and every race that he enters, he's always near the front, racing with some of the best riders in the world. It just does my head in. But who do we think should be representing Great Britain at these first ever esports cycling world championships? Well, leave your comments down below and let me know who you think should be selected in both the men's and the women's. But for the men, if it was a selection of 4, Ed Laverack, I mean, I know the current state of Cam Jeffers, and I know that British Cycling would never select him. So I'm gonna leave Cam, but I would normally put him in there. So you've got Ed Laverack, you've got Gavin Dempster, you've got James Phillips, and again, depending what his condition is like, someone like John Mould or Ian Bibby, both, you know, ex-professional riders who are still capable of doing good things and have good experience on Zwift. I suppose I'd have to drop one of them and pick Max Steadman, because I also think Max Steadman is going to be up there. But apart from these four, that's who I'd take. Gavin Dempster, James Phillips, Ed Laverack, John Mould. Over in the women's, Leah Dixon has to be up there. April Tacey has to be up there. I'd take Dame Sarah Story. If you look at her Zwifting experience, she has spent a lot of time on Zwift. She's done a lot of time trials. We know how strong she is. And she's done a lot of races on Zwift as well. So she has not only the power, but also the experience of the platform. I'd also take Joss Loudon and Anna Henderson. And that's literally me just going on the companion app and looking who has had good results. Like, why can't British Cycling do that? How stupid is it for them not to just spend a couple of minutes doing that and then working out how to put them in the system on UCAD or in a UCI team if they're in a UCI team, and allowing them to race and giving British Cycling the opportunity to win a world championship. Or here's a question for you. Now, if you win a world championship or an Olympic medal, you automatically go onto lottery funding. That's how all the riders are paid on British Cycling. Now, if you win a world championship in the esports category, does that automatically mean that you are entitled to that money? So have they simply selected all these riders because they are currently on the program, the Olympic development or Olympic podium program, and they won't have to pay them if they win the world championship because they're already funded? Maybe that's not the case, but I'm sure it would be. It's a UCI sanctioned event. It's a world championship where you get a rainbow jersey. Did they simply go off this selection so they didn't have to bring anybody into the system and pay them funding? I don't know. But think about that one. Right, leave your comments down below on this one. Who do you think should have gone for the British squad? And who do you think is going to win that championship? Are we going to see a community rider take it to the professionals, show them how it's done and beat them? Or are the professionals going to come through and shine through and show that, yeah, they might not know Zwift, but they're a professional for a reason? I don't know. Leave your comments down below.